Hello and welcome to Mooks and Monsters. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is not Rob Ward, sadly, but we have an equally excellent person to join us as the guest, as the co-host, Isa McLaren. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you. And well, we were just getting introduced just now, and I think this is going to be an interesting episode. Last episode, I talked to one of my old friends, Brendan Nato, who guest hosted that episode. But this time, we've got an entirely new gamer in the Mooks and Monsters fold. And Isa, tell us a little bit about your history of gaming.
Tabletop gaming goes back. I dabbled in it in college, but really about 15 years ago, I really got excited about it and I wanted to start running D&D for my kids. So at that time, I got involved with a local gaming group and started running D&D encounters at a local gaming store. And I did that for years. I became really involved in the gaming group. My role within that was to help introduce new players to the world of tabletop gaming, those who had heard of probably Dungeons and Dragons and wanted to try it out, but really had no idea what it was all about. So I would run workshops and beginner games for those people to teach them sort of the ins and outs, how the dice rolling works, how role play works in it, introducing them to the different systems. And I really loved that so much. I've run home games for my family. I've run home games for friends. I've tried out lots of different systems. I find I really like the quirky indie games much better than the rigid, rules-heavy games.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm kind of coming down in the same trajectory right now. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna just run these games that have fewer rules and more creativity. Generally, is kind of how I see it.
But exactly, that's the fun part to me.
Yeah, generally that leans toward, let's just play a story, and the system is either secondary or it's there to assist with the story in specific ways. So it sounds like, and actually I kind of wanted to applaud while you were talking there, because it sounds like you've been a very helpful member of the gaming community for people like me, because I'm not, I have introduced my share of people to the game, but the role-playing games, but I think it's just awesome that people go out there and, serve as ambassadors for this kind of game, because it's my favorite style of any kind of game, basically. Maybe my favorite kind of entertainment, period.
I must have done something right, because 3 of my kids play D&D or variants of that, and 2 of them run games in the various systems that they play. So I'm really proud of that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, gamers raising gamers. That's a story of success.
A couple years ago, for my Christmas present, my youngest kid said, I'm going to run a game. And they all just kind of showed up at my house with characters. And we sat down, and it was the wildest, most bizarre game ever. And it was such fun that they took the time to do that. It made it a really great present.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sounds incredible. So you say you like indie games. So what's your favorite indie game that you've run then?
Hands down, it's got to be Leverage. If you're familiar with the TV show, it's based on the TV show full of con artists and thieves. It's written actually by the same people who did the TV show. So what you see, the roles of the characters in the TV show is directly translated to the game. Because I'm also a writer. I write about con artists and thieves. So it had been my goal for years to find a system that would let me do this. And once I found Leverage, I was totally in love. It's the perfect system for it.
Nice. Yeah. My experience with the thieving and con artist kind of RPGs is pretty limited. It's Blades in the Dark, which is this recent game, but I think it's Evil Hat made it. I don't remember, though. Don't quote me on that. But Blades in the Dark is like a steampunk kind of...
Yeah, it's like paranormal thieving. Yeah.
Yeah. I made my own setting for it because I can't keep my hands off settings. But as the regular listeners will know, but the setting in the book's actually really good. There's some amazing stuff in there. I backed it on Kickstarter for like $2, and I got so many books out of it. It's really inspiring. I've only run the game a few times. but it's pretty good too.
I've played it once, and I own the book. It was gifted to me, and it looks amazing. I'm not a big fan of paranormal though, so that's kind of what's keeping me from diving straight into that. As well as there's another one called, I think it's called Laundry or The Laundry. It's like secret agents doing paranormal stuff, so it's kind of X-Files meets James Bond.
Oh, that's neat. I like paranormal stuff. I write fantasy and science fiction in my day job, I guess you could say. But yeah, it's not exactly so I have almost always have a fantasy element to my games. But it is interesting because I think you could probably take almost all the supernatural elements out of Blades in the Dark pretty easily. But if you already have a game that does a similar thing like Leverage, it seems like you may not need Blades in the Dark if you're going to run more of a modern game.
I'll probably give it a try. I mean, I have the book. Why not?
Absolutely. Though that is a game. That game's really funny. Just the funny detail about it that I really liked is that if your character dies, it says explicitly in the book, you can switch over to play as a ghost, and there's just a character sheet that's a ghost. And there's a whole ecosystem basically for just characters that have died coming back as vampires or having their ghosts invested in golems or whatever. It's pretty funny.
Cool. But, they did not touch on that in the one shot I was in. It was sort of a try it out kind of game, so it didn't go into all the detail about it.
It's pretty funny. It's also a really nice, simple game. So as far as the actual mechanics go, I guess there's one other thing about that's just sparked a thought in me, because there's one other element of Blades of the Dark, I'll just say by way of explanation, I find really fascinating, which is how it's not really super rigid, but you'll probably identify with this as you played a part of it, but played a game of it at least. But it has kind of a formula for how you run the session, or at least how you run a con or a heist basically in the game, right? There's different phases. I remember I read the book pretty extensively, so there's these different phases, and so it kind of guides players through the story. That kind of structure. Do you find that kind of structure helpful in an RPG, or is it something you more or less ignore?
I find it very helpful, and it might be that my writer's brain automatically does that. Mm-hmm. But sometimes players get so bogged down. Sometimes they latch onto something that you really didn't intend to. And if there's a mechanic in the game that helps you move it forward, I find that to be really helpful to keep the flow going. So you're not just railroading them. Something within the game system says, okay, well, it's time to do this now.
Right. It's kind of like, actually, the thing with Blades of the Dark, it's kind of like they've got it's kind of like a combat system, but it's for the whole game, right? Everything fits into one of these phases.
Right. Yeah, I really like that I like the I can't remember if it's called luck or not, but there was like something, if you roll badly, the GM can offer you something.
Oh, Devil's Bargain, yeah.
Yes, that's it. I really liked that aspect of the game.
Yeah, that's neat. Anyway, that was a bit of a tangent about Blades of the Dark, but it is a game I do sponsor, obviously, back on Kickstarter. Very excited about it still, even though I don't get a chance to run it very much. And also it ties in with the leverage angle. But the other thing I was thinking about with when I meet new people who are new to me, gamers, I always wonder, what their relationship is to the big dog. I mean, because D&D is ascendant again, it beat Pathfinder once more. It's now the top dog again as far as RPGs go, thanks to 5th edition. But how do you stand on D20 games?
I like them. They're straightforward. I like combat, except when it gets bogged down. So I like the systems that have sort of a built-in mechanic for speeding that up. I kind of like D20. I liked 4th edition, so kind of judge me on that.
I don't know much about 4th edition. I was not running D&D at that point.
Everybody hates it, but I really liked it. I found it very easy to pick up and use. Because the D&D version that I tried to play before that was the one that had THAC0 in it.
Oh
I can't
gosh,
remember
yeah.
which that was.
That was
But
AD&D probably.
yeah, so when I learned that, I was also taking calculus in college, and I just couldn't deal with that kind of math in my entertainment. So when I picked it up again, it was fourth edition, and fourth edition was like really designed to grab MMO players. They were trying to bring back like the World of Warcraft players back into tabletop games. So it has a lot of mechanics that are a lot like that. The leveling happens a little bit more quickly. You get access to a wider variety of spells at a lower level. I knew D&D well enough from running encounters at a game store for almost 2 years that if somebody walked up to me and said, hey, do you want to play? I could whip up a scenario for them in about 10 minutes and have everything statted out. That's how easy it was to deal with. Fifth edition, there's some things I like about it, but because I don't know it well enough, it's hard for me to say I prefer that over fourth edition. Pathfinder I like to play, but I won't run it again, ever.
Oh, why not?
It is too rules heavy for me.
Yeah.
Everything gets bogged down.
I feel a similar way. Pathfinder is, of course, based on third edition D&D or 3.5. And that's where I really got started or got really intensely into gaming, into role-playing games. But I've kind of outgrown the part where I need that kind of minutia and detail. So it's weird because I still say, I talked about this last week, but I still have this respect for Spycraft 2.0, which is extremely complicated. It's extremely rules heavy, lots of detail. But it's just possibly it makes more sense to me because it's a modern game and it's about, and actually because originally it was the official James Bond RPG, I think Spycraft was. It makes perfect sense that you want that level of kind of minutia because if you've read any of the James Bond books, which I'm a big fan of the first one at least, I've read Casino Royale now and I really enjoy it. I'm reading a few more soon, but there's so much minutia in that book about all the little details and all the equipment and stuff. It makes sense that you would want that kind of feel in a game. Anyway, I do agree though. The D20 games, they really do. And actually, my regular co-host Rob Ward, people will remember this if they've listened before, is not a big fan of D20 games as far as, or at least the third edition D&D specifically, because of the complication, right? And keeping track of all those hit points and all that stuff, it gets old. I'm actually kind of anti hit points now, unless there's like 5 of them on the character sheet, because you've got 100 hit points. Wow, what does that even represent now? It's kind of it gets to me.
Well, I played last weekend a game. It was a D20 game, Dungeon Crawl Classics. It's an OGL system that crossbreeds Appendix N, which I've never heard of, with a streamlined version of 3E.
Interesting.
And we played 0 level characters. So like two of mine had 1 hit point to start out with. My highest hit point character was 4. And with this one, I've played other funnel games where like you expect your character to die. So you have 4 characters to start with. But when I played those in the past, it's been you play 1 character at a time. Mm-hmm. This one, everybody at the table rolled up 4 characters and we went as a mob.
It's a whole platoon of characters
to storm this dungeon. And it was really fun. It got to use really strange dice in this. So if you like weird dice, this might be a game for you. There's a 7-sider, a 24-sider, and a 30-sider, as well as a 2-sider, a 3-sider. And then I think we used we didn't use the 100-sider. I think the 30-sider was the biggest one we used.
Wow, I've never rolled the D30. I have rolled the D100, an actual D100, not just the 2D10s.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. I had one of those around here at some point, but it's not a very practical die to carry around.
No, but if you like weird dice, this might be the game for you.
Oh, it sounds really interesting, actually. Honestly, I really do kind of like the core mechanic of any D20 game, which is roll a D20, see what happens. Because I'm beginning to warm up to those, like a 2D10 system or systems that use more smaller dice. But there's just something about rolling a nice D20. It's simple, gives you enough range without giving you a whole ton without giving you all the granular detail of a D100. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And, this one, it was run by my friend Jonathan. Hi, if you're listening. And it was, so you don't have races and classes in this. You sort of pick from a table for what your background is. And so if it doesn't say anything specific, that means you're a human, but you could be a halfling. Like one of my characters was a halfling moneylender. And moneylender isn't a class that we know in the other D20 games. So he doesn't really have a class. It's not till he levels up that he might be able to specialize in, say, acquiring money as a moneylender. And so that would appeal to me because that means he'd be a thief. And I had a dwarven herder. And it didn't say what he herded, but he was just a dwarf. And that it gave him, like the low light vision and that kind of thing. And it was really fun. So when we're about a third of the way through and about half the characters on the table were dead. And so one guy's like there rolling up new characters really fast. And he's like, oh, and from the back of the crowd, someone you didn't notice before steps forward.
Oh, it's great. I love a game that can be that simple. That's like, okay, yeah, you can just make a new character during the game and it doesn't bog everything down.
It was very simple. It's straight, roll 3d6s for your ability scores and then roll some dice for a random table to get you your hit points and armor class and that kind of thing.
Neat. Yeah, I mean, that sounds great. I'll have to check that out because I have some people that I know who are just, who are kind of diehard D20 fans or who are more used to that kind of game. Granted, I have shaken a lot of them out of that because I'm running weird home brews and games that they're really simple as well. Trying to run Fate recently and trying to get people together to do that. Maybe at some point on this podcast, I'll be able to get a Fate game together. That'd be awesome. But yeah, that sounds really fun. I gotta say, nice and simple. And actually, it reminds me, there's this game that was on Kickstarter just recently, but I had the beta version of it. It was a mecha RPG, so it was the sci-fi mecha game with giant robots.
Oh.
But the mechanic in that was like, okay, you just have 3 character traits and then 3 skills, and that's based in most of your pilot stats, right? And I thought that was really cool because the character traits were they're just personality traits, and they don't have any game mechanics. You just check them off, and you take damage from a non-mech weapon. Of course, you take damage from a mech weapon, and you're out of your mech, you die because you're still. But anyway, I thought it was really cool. That game was on Kickstarter recently. I think they funded, but yeah. Just so minor plug for that nice simple system. I mean, I thought the mechs were a little more complicated and they were a little annoying for me personally, but I think it was a pretty good system overall. And I obviously don't know how they finished it out because I don't have the full game yet. Anyway, I'm Tangent City today. That's kind of normal. But as far as do you have any current games you're running right now?
I am between games. My long-running home game broke up. I think it's been a while now. It's been at least 9 months. So I'm kind of between games. A friend of mine is running a Pathfinder game, but I'm not quite sure I want to get involved in that. I love my friend, but he tends to play with really power gamers.
Yeah.
And who know how to take full advantage of a system. And that's really not my style.
Yeah. It's not much fun to be left in the dust either.
Yeah.
I've had my troubles with power gamers in the past. But yeah. Anyway, we are running about out of time. So let people know, where can they find your book? Because obviously, as an author, that's important. Everyone should go pick up authors' work when they hear about them.
My book is called A Kiss for Luck. It's a lighthearted crime fiction thriller. And you can find it wherever books are sold in all the major retailers. You can also find it at threefuriespress.com.
Wonderful. Also, do you have a Twitter handle or a similar social media presence?
IW McLaren on Twitter and Isa McLaren on Facebook.
Awesome. Thank you for being on the show. And yeah, so
Thanks for having me.
Oh, great. It's been great. And as for this podcast, you can find us at mentalcellularpublications.com. Follow Rob Ward on Twitter, if I could remember his Twitter handle. I told you last week I'd remember it, but I forgot. I think he's at Rob Ward, but no, at Stage Hat. At Stagehead is his Twitter handle. I used to type that in all the time. I got off course. I'm at T Niederreiter on Twitter. You can follow this show on Facebook. That's Of Mooks and Monsters on Facebook. And of course, MetalCellarPublications.com has all the archives. We're hosted by Libsyn. That's all, folks. Thanks for listening.